Well, my name is Charlotte Ruth Oltmann, and nobody calls me Charlotte Ruth Oltmann. Everybody calls me Ruthie, and if they call me Charlotte, I have no idea who they're talking about. Oh, February 27, 37. So I'm now 85, and I feel that's kind of fun to be 85. I scared the daylights out of a guy at church because he came over and sat beside me and started chatting, at a luncheon. And he said, would you mind telling me how old you are? So I said, oh, no, not at all. I'm 85. About that point, he collapsed and left. It turned out, by asking other people, he was actually 70. I scared the heebie-jeebies out of him. I thought it was pretty funny. I was born in Ottawa. My father was born in Alberta, and my mother was born in Quebec. How's that for the far ends of the spectrum? And my mother is not French. Her background is Scottish. So she had red hair, and I had kind of red hair. And my father's background, his parents emigrated from Norway. So there's two sort of things. It's quite interesting. They immigrated about 1909. So they were pioneers in Alberta, his parents. And anyway, I did a history on his family, like a bio thing on my father, and that somebody had done something like that on my mother's side, but I couldn't do the mother's side because I was in Alberta at the time. I left Ottawa when I was 18, and I went to a seminary in Toronto because I really wanted to study the Bible. And I went through it really took me something like three or 4 years to get a 2-year. But, I wasn't in there for a big degree. I was just interested. I had worked part-time in Toronto. This was in Toronto. And so I worked part-time, and that I ended up being a secretary in Toronto for quite a number of years.
And then what took you to the West?
Well, I worked in Toronto for about 8 years, counting the seminary time. And then I really felt I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in Toronto. So I packed up my bags and whatnot, and I worked my way west. I visited a sister in Sudbury area, and then I spent a month in Winnipeg working and just, seeing that I was following my star, which is a good way of putting it. And then I worked for a month or two in Regina, and then I got a job in Calgary working for lawyers as a secretary. And then I went up to the Alaska Panhandle to visit a friend, and they were living in Wrangell, Alaska. And then I came back and got a job with a lawyer. I got fired from my job as a secretary. I've been a legal secretary. So I got fired from that. And I was devastated. And in the meantime, I had joined the hostel group and been hiking and some climbing and stuff like that, skiing, ski touring. So because I got fired from the job and I was devastated, and I was hanging out with the hostel group. So then one of the girls said, well, why don't you run a hostel for the summer? Well, okay, I ran a hostel for the summer. That was the beginning of the end. That was the best advice I could get. So I went off and I ran Spray River Hostel for 4 months, and it just one thing led to another. Just one thing led to another. Doors opened, doors closed. It was fantastic, and it got better and better in a way. And I didn't have to type up these silly documents for some lawyer. I mean, they were all fine, but anyway. So that was the beginning of the end, and for the next 50 years, I did things in the mountains.